Yeah, I think they keep the principles in all the aspects of even on the OS they make for laptops and iPads and stuff, and for ebooks.
Well, I disagree, Yorgos, because I think the principles can never change because it's like a rule.
Yeah,
it's like an alphabet you can never change because the principle.
I didn't say that.
I think it's quite important to have principle in a layout. It's well structured. It's well, yeah.
I said that they use. No, I didn't say that they don't use them. Yeah, no, I think
because it's like how you read a page because you start from the title to down.
Yeah, there's some different principles in Screen rather than a paper. Okay, you can't make a magazine layout in a web page. You have to make a different layout in a web page so you can read better. So you need bigger fonts, or maybe you need you don't need the same columns. You can read the newspaper columns in a website in Screen.
Maybe. True, yeah.
Nobody uses this, so it's not a principle.
But in newspaper you can't change the layout.
Have you seen
structure?
Have you seen it?
In digital you can change it, and you can make.
And it's instant.
Yeah. And you can make the audience follow different way. If you know what I'm trying to say.
Can you explain that?
No, I said that I think that there are different principles between paper and between Screen. But yes, the principles that are made for Screen, they're based on the print ones, but they're not the same. Okay.
Can we pass?
No.
Okay. I'm going to go with yes.
I would say they are clean type normally, without not close to Helvetica. This what kind of principles like clean typography, spacing, like quite clear, so that people read quite fast. Say the typography name is Serif Sans.
Sans serif.
Sans serif.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
This what I understand is what I get, because principles of a type, I guess means how you can read it. Yeah.
I think holistic. Sound with static. Static is still.
Static is still type.
Oh.
So.
Well, kinetic can show emotions, whereas
it's more expressive in sound.
Yeah. So if you say kinetic type, you can understand that there is sound there. So you can see that.
But also kinetic could be hard to read because the motion could be fast or slow.
But that gives off the effect.
Like it's
True.
No, with static, maybe you have a background music to be relaxed, but no, it's not easy to show sound with static. Only with kinetic type you can show sound. You cannot show sound with static. How to show it? To have a background, it's okay, but to show sound, the type should be kinetic.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way.
I think it's interesting, the idea of showing sound as opposed to making sound. I think one of the things that brings to mind is the idea, and I was just talking with another student about that, was the idea of giving an experience or trying to present an experience. So you can allow someone to have an experience, or you can try and imitate it. And I think this is a question that kind of relates to that, where it depends on what you're trying to say with the type. If it's about movement and sound, then it depends on what you want to be said. So it's easier to show sound with static or kinetic type. It depends on what your intention is.
But let's say that the intention is something that is like voiceover. I would maybe go for kinetic because of the kinetic typography videos exist. So this is what comes into my mind. But if it's not, if it sounds like the futuristic sound, how it was the famous futurist. A famous futurist.
Malevich?
No. What is sound? I can't remember now. There's more. I can't remember the name of the futurist painter that was doing animated typography on his paintings. So static works also. But if it's easier to say, let's say maybe we would like to say more what is more representative of sound. Most probably kinetic, because sound you imagine us moving. Yeah.
Because things exist in time, and if things exist in time, then kinetic type allows us to deal with time in that sense. But the idea, the question for me that's tricky is the notion is it easier to show sound? Once again, for me, easier, I'm not sure what you mean by easier.
For the creator.
Yeah, of course it's easier to make static type than to make it move. Yeah, let's put it on there, done. But I think in terms of kinetic type, it does have things to move. It depends on how you sort of move that through time. That has a lot to do with how we sort of imagine sound relating to type.
Yeah.
I think vice versa. You need the sound first to follow the beats.
Yeah.
Me too, I
Yeah.
think the same.
The instruments.
Because all the times I try to make a video with
To show the sounds.
to connect sound with kinesis, it's much easier to have the sound first, so you can see. It's easier to change the movement of something rather than change the sound.
Alright.
This is a technical question.
Okay, technically, I would ask you this. It's easier to match the type with the sound. So it's
Sound
easier
first.
to first to have the sound and then matching the motion to that and the typography.
It's
I think
difficult
visuals.
to answer.
I'd
I
say
think it's both. I would go both. Sound.
About visuals, you can see what is there. As
No,
a
but then-
sound,
but with
you
the
have to
sound-
see.
sound
Yeah, oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah, with
difficult.
sound you have to imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, with visuals, much
But
more.
yeah, visuals like it's trying to
Straight
tell
to the
you
point.
what you want to see.
But
So
you could
again,
actually
maybe-
change your viewing. For example, if there's an image of a cup and something else in the background, I could be seeing it differently. You could be seeing it differently. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I think,
it depends on the person how he thinks. But if you have only sound, it makes work your mind, works your imagination.
Yeah.
If you have visual, it's more ready to eat.
Ready made.
Ready, yeah. So it's not. There's no answer to that question. It depends, I think, to the
50-50.
person. Yeah. Do you think adding sound to kinetic typography changes your mood?
Yep.
It definitely helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Like horror movie.
It's so different to see just a static type or sounds. The sound makes so much different to videos, to
I think
everything.
in kinetic you don't really need sound. I think the type on its own kind of says a lot of things. If you change the background to something, like a blood or something, and then the type really.
Yeah, but imagine this thing to hear
Then you don't
sound.
really need the sound to
But
really.
it's more. It changes your mood.
Yeah.
It's the question is if it changes your mood. Imagine to see a blurry phone or see a blurry phone and to hear the background scary music. It changes your mood more. It's
Yeah, it does.
it's okay. How do you think the expression of visuals and sound has changed since Adobe became widely accessible? Of course, Adobe makes a lot of people work with sound and kinetic sound and typography and visuals and graphics, and it's a very common tool.
Well, it's definitely been a lot of changes since the old times and now, because the old times they didn't really like have these technology to express kinetic fonts, and whereas nowadays we have technology to express the kinetic art.
Now, even a 10 years old opens a Photoshop, not After Effects, but he can create a video of kinetic type
It's
or
not
kinetic sound.
perfect.
not just perfect, but they can access to that. They can access. They
Yeah,
can
it's
have
become
access.
more easier.
My dad didn't have access to that thing, so he couldn't express himself with visuals and sound. But now it's much more easier with these tools to express yourself through visuals and sound. So yes, Adobe makes.
Heavy.
How do you think people expressed visual sound before the digital era?
I would say in a gallery.
In a gallery.
Yeah, so painting and just someone playing violin or something. That's the mood.
Back in the days, it was difficult for people to express themselves. Nowadays, it's much easier with the technology. But
But is easier better?
so
Is it being easier a better thing?
Easier is a better thing, but
it's
again, when it's easier, you can't like do much because some things you just can't do in the digital thing, or like something you can do with hand, but you can't put in the digital thing.
Which technique do you think is more effective, before or now? Of course now.
I think a mix of both.
But before, I think people were
Mix
more
of both.
creative. Now
Yeah.
it's all done
Now
digitally.
Yeah.
Now it's more ready
Yeah.
things, so you can.
You
Okay,
can-
let's put this.
Some of the
It's very
techniques
easy.
that we use nowadays was
It's already there.
invented a long time ago, and we're just reusing it. So I think, yeah, I think.
And maybe something now we made just for 5 minutes, just for fun. Maybe they take ages to do it
Yeah.
years ago. So
Yeah.
now we don't think a lot.
I think we just like.
Yeah. But it's more effective now.
Yeah, it is more effective now.
It's definitely
Because
more effective,
the
yeah.
question is about more effective. So yes, now it's
Yeah.
more effective, but this doesn't mean that it's better.
Yeah.
Well, which technique? Copying on.
Do you think moving type is powerful and reflective enough to portray a visual message on its own without sound? Or do you think sound has a strong impact on the overall conclusion? Yeah, as we said before, that together is very good. Okay?
Yeah.
Moving type itself is
Interesting.
interesting, yes, but if you put sound, you make it more
A different mood.
dynamic and more,
Strong feel. and
Yeah.
emotion.
and maybe your attention is much more in that, and you feel more things. And,
You drift away.
Yeah.
But this is not bad.
It can be both.
Which one do you think more?
I've always said that I think that music or sound has more impact on us because it isn't as clearly defined as visual work. I've always said that I'm more drawn to musicians in terms of sort of people as creators than I am to visual artists. I think there's something amazing that happens that sort of hits us inside of the gut that comes from music. That oftentimes with visuals, it kind of comes in here and it goes into the brain, comes back out. There's something very immediate about music that we don't necessarily get through visuals. We have to contemplate visuals. Music, especially when music's performed live, always seems very instantaneous. And I think it has that kind of power.
I would go also for sound because let's say music also has this element that you can have it as a background thing, like a background element. You can work, you can think, you can let yourself do some other activity, and at the same time the music or sound can influence your feelings. But with the visuals you need to focus on what you're looking. So you cannot have a background image, you know, if it's like something that gives a specific emotion, you have to concentrate on that if it's visual.
I also think it's hard to separate the two out.
I think we have about it. Edson?
Well, animation programs are like quite new to this era because again, like back in the days, they had no programs, and today now it's easier to like add movements and sound on time.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer movement type or do you prefer static type?
I prefer movement.
Yeah, me too. I
Yeah.
think it's much more interesting
But
nowadays.
the thing is, like, if you're on train, you wouldn't prefer moving type, would you?
Depends on the speed of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
if you're on train, if you're on a, walking,
Yeah, that's
you wouldn't
why.
prefer moving type.
But the
So-
moving type would like want you to like
The moving type would only be titles.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
Yeah,
no,
time
yeah.
sequence or something.
No, you can make art. You can make.
You can make an ad, yes, but let's
But
say
you can't have like this amount of text.
yeah. I mean, if
Oh,
this
yeah.
text
Yeah,
was
yeah,
It
no,
depends
no,
on the
no.
speed as well.
it
and
would be
then
difficult.
express-
It's because it's on its own, you can read and think about it. But if it's moving, then it's quite difficult.
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Because it can enhance the feeling. If it's something, let's say if it's something happy or if it's something sad, it can enhance the feeling if you add something like that. But if you do something reverse, like something that contradicting what you see, it can be humorous.
I mean, the notion of adding sound to things is oftentimes about a soundtrack. And I think if you think about films, or if you drive a car, or people who are on the tube and they have their earphones in, they tend to like to create that soundtrack so that they're able to experience the world they want to. Meaning that we can shift our perceptions of things through sound. And that's oftentimes what happens, depending on what type of sound you add to the typography, or to the moving typography. It will obviously create very, very different feelings and moods.
Well, from my experience, I've been a graphic designer. I was a graphic designer in the early 70s. And so when Adobe came out, it was a new revelation to me. I had a colleague who was working next to me who introduced me to Photoshop. And Photoshop at that time was just one layer. You didn't have any layers, just one layer. And so if you wanted to do something very simple like a drop shadow, you had to use channels and masking. So it meant that you would cut out, for instance, a figure using a mask and then put a channel there and then fill it. And it was all done like live, like you had if you imagine that the base was paper and you had these things that you were holding in your hand and it was a channel and a mask and you had to get it right and then drop it. And then that was it, you couldn't change it, you couldn't go back. And it was very, very similar to the old photo retouches. You just had the one basic layer. And then the next version, I think it was version 7, they brought in layers. So all of a sudden you had all these different layers. And Photoshop, and it became much easier, technically much easier, to be able to play around with drop shadow and all sorts of different other effects that came out. And so your mind just started to think about all these different things that were available that you could do with type and with images and everything. Then I remember when After Effects came out, it was a new program, and that just blew everyone's minds because it was Photoshop on steroids. Because you had all these layers and you could change the layers, you could pull the layers back, up and down, sideways, change the dimension, and it just became magical. And you could put type on there and turn the type around and change it, and make it go out quick and come in, resize it, all sorts of different ways. So it became like a brand new tool. And so people then started to do all sorts of different things they couldn't do before. And it changed, I think it changed how people thought, how people were doing things creatively. Because now you had this tool, and before you couldn't do these things, but now you can do so much more, and so the tool helped you with your creativity. But I think now, everyone's got that, and they do bring in changes, but the changes aren't as big as those big changes back then. And so people need to have good ideas now. Before, you could just think, oh, I could do that using this tool. Let's do it. So you would focus much more on the technique of it. But now, you need to have good ideas because it's easy to learn a program. They're there. So you need to have a good idea, then think how you can do it. But there's cross-fertilisation in having the tool and having the idea. So now, you can see now, if you look back, you can see how having the tools and having the digital media has really helped people in being able to explore type and how it fits in with images. And so now it's great. It's great.
I would say in a gallery.
In a gallery?
Yeah, a painting and just someone playing violin. That's the mood.
Back in the days, it was difficult for people to express themselves. Nowadays, it's much easier with the technology. But
But is easier better?
so
Is it being easier a better thing?
Easier is a better thing, but
it's
again, when it's easier, you can't like do much because some things you just can't do in the digital thing, or like something you can do with hand, but you can't put in the digital thing.
It makes me feel really old. Before the digital era. You mean like when I was born? Imagine what it was like. I don't know, we never had sound back then. It's a brand new thing.
Definitely. Okay, definitely through drawings on film, frame by frame on films, and through color organ. You know, the color organ is like an organ in the instrument, what they use in the churches, but they used to project color also. So it's a color organ. Then the Lumia. This is like lights again. Then we have filmmaking, which is Oscar Fissinger, and all this is drawings on film. Yeah.
I think too that if you go into maybe some of the more static arts, oftentimes the notion of process-based things or the record of a movement, so the trace of something, so oftentimes movement would be relayed as a type of sound. So if I was able to say, make a drawing that had sort of very, very harsh marks, but I kept the traces or the marks that are left behind, that is a way of kind of producing a visual sound. Okay? So it came a lot of times with the notion of the trace, or the elements of things that are left behind. So we imagine something happening, and it's an amalgamation of all those things coming together at one moment.
And abstract painting, of course, Kandinsky.
Of course now.
I think a mix of both.
But before, I think people were more creative. Now
Yeah.
it's all done
Now
digitally.
Now it's more ready
Yeah.
things, so you can.
You
Okay,
can-
let's put this.
Some of the
It's very
techniques
easy.
that we use nowadays was
It's already there.
invented a long time ago, and we're just reusing it. So I think, yeah, I think.
And maybe something now we made just for 5 minutes, just for fun. Maybe they take ages to do it
Yeah.
years ago. So
Yeah.
now we don't think a lot.
I think we just like.
Yeah. But it's more effective now.
Yeah, it is more effective now.
It's definitely
Because
more effective,
the
yeah.
question is about more effective. So yes, now it's
Yeah.
more effective, but this doesn't mean that it's better.
Yeah.
Well, which technique?
I don't understand the question again. Which technique? Meaning
with digital era.
the
Yeah.
digital era, the ones.
Like-
I feel that's a really loaded question because I think it has to do with the culture that receives it. Okay, so it depends upon how we receive information. If you go back, sort of, say, to the 1980s, and you put a television screen in front of somebody, and they were actually watching, say, CNN News Now, and watching it back then, they probably wouldn't be able to understand it because there's too many bits of information happening all at once. But as culture sort of progressed, we've gotten used to these different ways of working. So I think that we've adopted or adapted to this new way that we sort of work with these things.
I would go for now, because with the technology we have now, we can recreate things that we used to, and this technology is not one. But we have extra things that we can, extra weapons to represent, let's say, sound. Can be 3D animation, can be motion graphics, can be video compositing.
Yeah, as we said before, that together is very good. Okay?
Yeah.
Moving type itself is
Interesting.
yes, but if you put sound, you make it more
different
dynamic and more,
Strong feel and
Yeah.
emotion.
and maybe your attention is much more in that, and you feel more things.
You
and,
drift away.
Yeah.
It has, but this is not bad.
I think obviously sound has a strong impact on what is portrayed, but I also think oftentimes what is in the composition, not only with the type but with the sound, meaning that maybe it's about sound for a bit and then it's silent and it has a very different impact. I think the idea that it's completely removed and nothing else is happening and it's completely silent is difficult to actually imagine, because there'll always be sound around unless you're inside of a very specific space with nothing else going on. So if I was to say, if I saw a visual message, say like on the tube, and there's no sound, but there already is sound around me, I'm very much aware of the busyness of people and things like that, so that kind of becomes the sound that I'm listening to while watching these images. I don't listen to them as if nothing else is there. That being said, sound has this weird thing where it doesn't have boundaries, so it travels. And I think that's really difficult to control, especially if you're going to use sort of that type of sound within a public message, because it becomes difficult because sounds overlap and they fall onto each other. And I think that's actually a really interesting place to play around with things. So I think that obviously sound has a strong impact on stuff.
I agree also, but the sound is composed with the video or the natural sound of things. For instance, when you go to see a digital poster in Piccadilly, if you take it out of the Piccadilly Circus and you hear it and you watch it on your own, it will look very different than putting it there. Putting it there, yeah, of course, it gives you the whole sensation of being in the center of London. Take it away from that and watch it at home, maybe it looks a bit awkward or a bit static or boring. But if you mean that composing anything with sound, seeing motion graphics with sound, that's completely different impact. Yeah, then it works. It works with the sound both ways. So I agree with Tim.
Well, animation programs are like quite new to this era, because again, like back in the days, they had no programs, and today now it's easier to like add movements and sound on time.
What do you prefer? Do you prefer movement type or do you prefer static?
I prefer movement.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I think it's much more interesting
Well,
nowadays.
the thing is, like, if you're on a train, you wouldn't prefer moving type, would you?
Depends on the speed of it.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
if you're on a train, if you're on a, walking,
Yeah, that's
you
why.
prefer moving type.
But the
So-
moving type would like want you to like
The
move
moving
into
type would
the
only be titles.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
Yeah,
no,
time
maybe.
sequence or something.
No, you can make art. You can make.
You can make an ad, yes, but let's
But
say.
you can't have like this amount of text.
Yeah, I mean, if
Oh,
this
yeah,
text.
yeah,
was
yeah,
It
written,
depends
no,
on the
no.
speed as well.
It
and
would be
like
difficult.
express-
But it's because it's on its own, you can read and, think about it. But if it's moving, then it's quite difficult to understand the question.
No. I like both.
I like both also.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
me too.
so-
I think it's like typography.
Yeah.
It changes everything. It changes all the feeling. It changes all the
Meaning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the meaning. It changes sound, changes everything. So yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, because it can create a completely different feeling. But again, somebody can easily argue the opposite. It depends on your intentions, but it is important for what? If it's important for showing the image and talk with the images, yeah, then it's not important the sound. But if you want to enhance the feeling and create the sensation, maybe sound helps to that.
I think it's an incredibly complicated relationship between sound and image, and it's one that can be manipulated in a lot of different ways. And it comes down to what you actually are trying to do with that relationship between the two. And I mean, I'm very curious as what it is to have sound shift an image even farther away from where it probably originally started from, and creating these sort of complex juxtapositions between sound and image, which can, I think, begin to convolute the message that you're trying to get across in a good way. So I think it's incredibly important how sound functions. And silence, I'm pretty sure that silence is a sound as well.
John Cage.
Sure. No, Jim Hobbs. Okay.
Do the questions and answer them.
Let me put the camera to see if I look good.
These are difficult questions. These are not quick questions to
come
answer.
on, guys.
Here's a quick interview. Do you think the principles of existing type are being used on screen type? If yes, what principles are being used?
Anastasia, should you want to do your PhD? Just a bit.
We don't need that.
You guys are good.
Where is the vodka?
The market, what?
Can we
Alright,
get
see you guys
at 3 o'clock?
Yeah, see you at 3.
Nope.
How long was it? Does it say the time?
I don't know.
It stopped halfway through.
How long it is?
What? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.